In the back, sure.
Is there much consensus on whether those memory effects are due more to encoding versus retrieval?
Well, the ones I just showed you, I think we're the only people that got them, and so do we have an answer to that question? No. How could we explain them? How would that be different? We kind of find similar effects of encoding, and when we have some measures that are just pure encoding, like is the face angry or happy, but how would we get at that with our memory test? You memory guys can maybe tell me, how would I sort it out in memory?
Yeah,
for
I didn't
faces?
figure. I figured maybe from neuroscience or something like that. If you
Get an MRI, just buy an MRI.
Yeah, right.
Sure. If you got any money, no, it's a good question. And Vaughn Becker might have a more intelligent answer, but I actually don't think we can sort that out. I'm guessing it's happening. A lot of these things are happening at all levels similarly. So kind of interesting when I was talking about the places where there's discrepancies, but usually what you'd expect is that there are the same things happening. If I'm frightened, it changes my encoding and my retrieval in consistent ways.
That suggests that it may happen at encoding because people are looking differentially at angry black males than they are at angry white males and usually white males. If I remember his data correctly, that with eye tracker he looks at the different patterns and where people are looking and how that maps onto memory. And so I think he does make an argument that there are some differences. A part of this happens at the level of encoding. Whether all of it does.
So in some sense, don't our data, when we find that people look less at black men but remember them better, that has to be an encoding effect, right? Unless people are just would suppress telling us they remember this guy. The fact that we're finding a boost in memory with less attention suggests that definitely something's happening at the encoding level. Is that?
So with the places where we add additional stimuli, like when they're seeing the abstract art in addition to the faces, and when we're suppressing the amount of time to look at the faces, and those do seem to yield differential results. So
Yes.
sometimes better memory with better memory accuracy with the additional stimuli would suggest that there are boosts at the level of encoding also.
Thanks, Jess. I'm glad you're here. Yes.
So I'm intrigued by your finding that the male faces look more angry but are not rated as being more masculine, if I understood that correctly.
We don't have that finding. The but are not rated as more. Somebody else does have that finding. Do you remember this, Janice?
Sorry, I didn't.
Well, I mean, my understanding was that when you change the facial morphology, you get a different pattern
Oh,
of
back
rating
to
them.
the angry. I'm sorry, I was thinking of the black face again. But go
Right, no. So
give me your question one more time.
When you add the cultural cues, then you get a big difference in the rated masculinity to the
Yes,
androgynous face.
right. Okay,
But then
now-
when you change the morphological features without changing the cultural cues,
We get
you don't-
anger, but not much masculinity.
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
We get a little masculine effect.
But presumably not enough to explain in
Yes.
consonant with this gender stereotype.
Right.
Right. So it seems to me there are three possibilities. One is that masculine faces just look more angry by accident, the way eagles look angry and dolphins look happy, right? It's just we're reading something into the faces based on some schema about emotion that doesn't apply.
Right.
That seems kind of implausible, given that in the cross-species case it makes sense, but within species case it doesn't. Another possibility is that there has been selection on male faces to look angry.
Right.
A third possibility is that there has been selection on anger expressions to look masculine. That is, that
That a woman, even
men
a
are
woman
more
wants to look more like a man.
yeah, men are more aggressive and dangerous than women. If your goal in an anger expression is to convey threat to the individual who's transgressed, then looking like you're more dangerous and aggressive is consonant to that goal. Right? And it could be that the two latter are not incompatible, but I wonder whether you have any thoughts about other possibilities, or I mean, you just kind of threw that out there and you didn't really explain it, and it's pretty intriguing finding.
Right. Well, Vaughn, first author on this paper, he believes it's the second. He believes it has to do with sort of the fact that masculine faces have evolved to look more threatening. Okay, but we have no data that would differentially support that. contrast to your third option that you talked about.
Well, presumably, a cross-species comparison could answer that, right? So that you would see, if you have species-specific threat displays,
Mhm.
and you have a sex difference in aggressive behavior, then it should be the case that the
It shows
direction
up
of
on the
selection is the
basis.
same
Yeah,
amongst those species.
yeah, that'd be interesting to look at.
Could it be, both of those options suggest that one thing came first and the second thing came later, so like emotion perception comes first and then the facial features are selected to.
Well, the second and
So
third
what I'm
could-
thinking it's more like,
it could be
another
both,
option
yeah.
could be,
Right.
a lot of perceptual recognition is sort of template based, right? So it's like, there's a prototype effect, and if the prototype is centered on male faces, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's selection on males to look more angry, or selection on
Both
anger
unfortunately-
expressions to be more masculine, but rather you have both sexes displaying anger, and we just, our prototype for what it is centered more on males. Right, so the
Right.
detector for anger is that the stimuli that male faces are giving activates the anger template better than, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the anger detector pre-existed that, and then the faces
Right.
changed to make it.
Well, there's also the co-evolutionary problem in the sense of, for example, hummingbird females are attracted to red, okay? They're attracted to red because red flowers, advertise themselves to hummingbirds by, evolving to be red. And now, basically, the attraction mechanisms males displays have ridden on the fact that hummingbirds are very sensitive to the color red. And so these things are changing dynamically over time. And so I'm not sure they're even teasable in that sense, but Rob, you know.
Just a fact, I mean, a thought that human faces have become massively less masculine in the last 500,000 years.
Have they? Oh, that's interesting.
Our chins have gotten smaller, our noses have gotten smaller, our eye bridges, brows have gotten smaller, and it's been pretty much, even in the last 20 or 30,000 years, faces have gotten less robust. So
That's interesting.
if you want the eyebrows to evolve, then the emotions have to be much older even than that, right? We've had to be assembled way
Right.
back when someplace.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, are you guessing that in fact what might be happening as we lived in larger groups, we needed to, actually, there's been selection on it, or just, do you think it's just an accidental?
There's a lot of the people who think about this think it has to do with maybe speech or food processing or a whole bunch of other things.
It's not cooperativeness, just that.
Well, who knows? We've gotten much less robust, our whole bodies. We used to be every person a nose tackle, basically, and now we're skinny, light boned little guys. And,
Sweet balls.
Well, we have bows and arrows, and plenty of ways to kill each other. So I don't know how about sweet we are, but
So sweet looking.
Sweet looking. Well,
Yes, right.
I'm not sure if the
Well, we
guy's
have a knife in our back.
if the guy's got a knife in his hand, how sweet looking he is, even if he's an old guy. But anyway, I just think that facial morphology has changed a lot in
Yeah.
relatively recent
Yeah,
evolutionary
that's
time.
interesting.
Back to the angry faces. You didn't report a sex difference, though I would have expected one. Is that you might expect that men would be faster at identifying the angry men and
Right.
faster than women, for example. But
Yes.
is there anything like that in that?
No, we don't. We actually thought we might. Mark Schaller works with us on a lot of this stuff, but he sometimes finds that men are. But do you find this in your work, that a sex difference in these subjects responding to threat cues differently?
It depends. It depends very.
Yeah. We don't. We thought we might have, because men are sort of but men are the ones that are fighting with that. They should be very sensitive to this. Of course, you could always, that's one of these problems of, creating a historical story about it. It's like, well, women should be sensitive because guys are dangerous, so.
Right.
But we're not getting sex differences. If we get a sex difference, I would have showed it to you.
Yeah, I figured.
But
I'm surprised by that.
we're not getting it.
I was curious about your explanation for the sex difference in looking at attractive faces. And I can see, the idea that men don't really differentially pay attention to attractive versus unattractive male faces.
Mhm.
You know, post hoc, I can see
Yeah,
why
but-
you might expect that.
I
But
didn't expect it. I mean, I have to say that with some of this, with what men do with attractive versus average men, I had no a priori.
Yeah.
I could have come up with multiple possibilities. And with what women do with attractive men, in terms of especially memory, we didn't really.
Right, well, that's bizarre too, but I was just
That's-
thinking, you know, given that men are competing with other men,
Yes, you would think.
and attractive men are more competitive in the mate market than unattractive men, you would think, you know, I mean, I guess it's
Yeah.
like sort of after the fact, you know.
But not just that, but let me just say there's some
Yes.
other things that over the years, some of my older data, which I might have talked about 9 years ago here, we did some stuff on contrast effects. So if I look at beautiful women, an average looking woman looks less attractive, okay? And this holds for both male and female stimuli, but there's this interesting finding we get that when we ask people to judge how committed they are to their current relationship. When men look at beautiful women, they're more available, okay? They're less committed to their current partner. When women look at handsome men, it does nothing to their level of commitment to their partner. When women look at high status men, it makes them more available. Men that are very successful is the way we manipulated it. And we did some other things. Now we looked at how does it make you feel about yourself when you look at handsome men or rich men, successful men. And there we found the kind of flip of that. We found that women felt bad about themselves they thought their mate value was less. They didn't feel generally low self-esteem, actually. They just felt that their mate value was less if they saw a bunch of beautiful women. Men did not change their evaluation of their mate value after looking at handsome men, but they did lower their mate value when they looked at successful go-getter type guys. Women were not affected by go-getter women. So it looks like we have some other data that suggests that in fact, women are thinking the danger to me is beautiful women. No surprise there. But men are thinking the danger to me is successful guys, you know, and not handsome guys. Because although Marty finds that, you know, women are looking at these handsome, good genes guys when they're ovulating, you know, the truth is probably most women don't actually have a lot of affairs, and you know, there might not be as much of a threat from these good-looking guys. There is a threat, though. There is some threat.
There is, and you might expect that if men can pick up on cues of fertility across the cycle, that's when you
That'd be
would expect
interesting.
them
When your girlfriend is
to
ovulating,
attend to and be threatened. by
then you look
these
at handsome men.
symptoms.
That would be, we have to do that study. Right, because I think that would be interesting if we found it. I would be surprised, but it's so easy to do ovulation studies, you know, why not?
Right, or even as a function of more, you know, like relationship context, like if you just divided subjects into half that were secure about felt secure about their relationship and half that
Or you
didn't.
made
You might
them
expect
feel-
the less secure
Yes.
guys to monitor the attractive faces.
Yeah, it made them feel insecure. You could do one of
Yeah,
these
fine.
questionable ethical studies where you do a study where somebody comes in and flirts with your partner. You would do a study about that? Somebody's done it. There was almost a fight in the lab. But, you know, have somebody flirt with the guy's girlfriend and then see whether he starts being attractive.
Yeah.
But I actually think that if we did find something, it might be when your partner is ovulating. But you know, it's these guys you would think, you know, a quarter of them have partners that are ovulating. Right? Or how long does ovulation go?
I mean, the high fertility phase is a few days of the cycle.
Oh, so
You know,
it's
the 28
10%
cycle.
of them then.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, and it's unclear whether all men are
They don't
able
even
to
know.
pick up on those cues. They may
Yeah.
not be spending that
But if they
enough
don't know,
time
they
with
should
their
be,
partners.
in terms of error management, if they don't know, they should guess it's more, right? They should estimate, she's always ovulating.
Well, but she also could leave him for the high status guy at any phase in her cycle.
Right,
So
right.
they're conflicting.
Yes, but
So
she's
they're
not gonna
trade-offs.
leave she's just gonna sleep with the handsome guy. And then, I mean, the other thing is that even though she might look at him and want to sleep with the handsome guy, there are other gigantic costs to women for actually having an affair, right? Tremendous jealousy. And so, you know, when you look at the statistics on actually having affairs, even though women get way more offers than men, they have fewer affairs than men. You know, and I don't know what the stats are now, but you know, you know, even during the peak of the sexual revolution, it was not like the majority of women had even one affair. So maybe it's just not enough of a threat. But leaving for a better guy, maybe that's a bigger thing. If the woman leaves, then she's going to be with that guy all the time during all of her upcoming ovulatory cycles. But I have no idea. I actually would have expected, why shouldn't guys live in enhanced men? It still is one of these funny things. But there it is, and we get it in all kinds of cognitive dependent variables. Guys are aschematic for good-looking guys. Rob.
So, this is a real question this time. So it's people like Ed Hagen and John Lead and people like that are prone to emphasize that we evolved in a world of groups of 23 people or something like that. That's Ed's number, 23. And
So does 24.
No, well, last time I talked was 23. But anyway, the point being that even in a more realistic picture of, 400 or 500 Aceh, we know who all the handsome guys are and all the rich guys are. We're going to need to look at them.
Right.
And so all these adaptive stories are conditioned on the necessity to acquire information. You put people in a situation where we're looking at strangers, which must have happened occasionally.
Well, didn't people get together like annually? Don't people, at least in horticultural societies, have like annual kind of festivals where lots of
I think that's
tribes
completely
get
wrong,
together?
and that we've been living in
Okay.
societies
All
of hundreds of thousands of people for a long time. But that's
Right.
the
Because
punchline of
there's
the
trade.
question:
Yeah.
aren't these really predictions about tribal scale societies in which we and if the band scale picture of the EEA is correct, if you showed people pictures of people they knew, you shouldn't get any of these effects because there'd be no information processing
Right.
benefit to staring at handsome guys because you already know he's handsome, right? I mean, so
Right.
it seems to me that's a way of testing which EEA is the
That's interesting.
is the correct EEA.
Yeah, I never thought of it. That is an interesting thought. It does it suggests that at least our subjects' mechanisms are not tuned to that kind of a 23, 24 person, whatever it is, crowd. We haven't looked at familiar. I mean, but I don't know what would happen. It's very hard to do that.
Yeah, of course.
To equate for attractiveness.
Experimentally,
and so on. But yeah, it's an interesting question. And then how long would it take? I mean, if you ask, well, how long have humans been living in larger groups, or at least groups that mean, well, there's also trade, there's.
If you're Ed, not long enough to make any difference in our motives, but if you're me,
Yeah.
we're
Right.
completely evolved for a world like that.
Yeah, right, or something closer to modern life.
Well,
And this
something like tribal scale life, where
Yeah.
a few thousand people, or of a few thousand,
Right.
speak the same language,
Yeah,
have the same moral system, have occasional gatherings, to trade wives, and there's a lot of long distance trade, et cetera, et cetera.
right. That's an interesting thought. I mean, it's, you don't certainly need to rapidly recognize, even with attractiveness, you don't really necessarily need to rapidly recognize it, even in the modern world.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like, although if you have a mechanism that likes it, it's like, it'll still work quickly, even though it didn't really need to work quickly. But that's an interesting point.
Sure.
Oh, sorry. Did you have, which one you had your hand up first?
I had a short follow-up comment, which was that it's also possible that this mechanism would be contingent on, the kind of environment that the individual finds itself in. So if it's finding itself in an environment where it's encountering lots and lots of people, maybe this kind of mechanism would be at work. If it's in a much smaller scale environment, it doesn't have to be fixed and, stable across all environments. It could be something that would be contingent.
So people who were raised in some little town and never were on a farm somewhere in the country might have the mechanism differentially sensitized or not sensitized.
But that's
a possibility.
That's evidence in favor of Rob's point, because selection would only favor the facultative
right. That would
ability.
require
If
even
that
longer.
There were, not only large-scale societies,
Right.
but that there was variation.
If it was a flexible mechanism, it would take even longer to get there, because we'd have to have.
I wasn't contradicting anyone else.
Yeah.
Adding a comment.
You passed, it's okay.
Time for one more.
Yeah, one more question.
I don't think this is quite as interesting as that question, but with respect to the outgroup heterogeneity effects that you have, where you get this interesting interaction between participant in an angry or in a feared state, remembering African American faces better.
Yes.
Right, and then also when they're angry, they remember better. Suggests some antecedent representations in the participants about African Americans, right? In particular, your participants, in the way that they represent African Americans.
Yes.
And one can imagine a number of different proposals about the nature of those representations. Prejudice, stereotypes, or how Steve Newberg would even say like emotional dispositions towards those people. I was wondering what you thought about those different proposals and what you think is likely moderating these effects.
What do you think about that, Janessa? That actually, since she worked in Steve's lab and actually has thought more about that, do you have a sense of?
I think we've talked about in terms of the typical tendency for our undergraduates to associate physical safety threats and fear and feel fear, particularly towards African Americans and but not towards other groups like Asians. That's why we did the study with Asian targets, because our thought was that it is this heuristic association between African Americans and danger, and particularly because of the sensitivity that Steve talks about in terms of sensitive dispositions and feeling fear.
So one interesting, another point kind of tangentially related to that, when I gave my talk at UCSB, I actually mentioned Carlos when I didn't today, because he was in the audience for a while. My guess is that these things are, that there's learning involved in who are the threatening groups. For example, my people of my parents' generation, or guys of my age who went to Vietnam, might have a different reaction to Asians, and maybe might change with, so there's some learning involved. I think Carlos, you may not like this representation of your stuff, but I think that Carlos's stuff suggests that even that kind of learning, it's prepared learning. That it's like, we're very good at learning, who the threatening people are, and we're good at learning about threatening males. Particularly, it's harder to, correct me if I'm getting your findings wrong, but it's harder to extinguish fear to a black guy, but not to a black woman. Is that correct? And it's easier to acquire. So it suggests that there's interaction between learning mechanisms, and our experiences, and evolved mechanisms that are sitting there waiting with, our brain has probably got some mechanisms that are, involve self-protection, but they have to be calibrated to where we are.
You get the effect actually towards Asian males as well, as long as you have some negative historical experience, either in the lab or outside the lab, towards Asians.
So we actually have, so Josh and I we're still trying to collect the data, hopefully publish these data, and so we've replicated some of these effects here, and I don't know, kept you completely up to date on some of our newest findings.
No,
We do find.
I want to publish it.
I know.
Or
So
am I
we
not a
do-
co-author anymore? Which
No, you are. We do find the effect with Asians here, particularly because our students, it sends some different threats to Asians, in particular, status and achievement related threats. So it's not necessarily physical safety, but depending on the context, because when we're seeing with that, so it's very consistent with those.
All right.